Greetings, Corpse Clubbers, and welcome to another episode of Corpse Club Horror BFFs. I am one of your Horror BFFs, Patrick Bromley, joined, as always, by my Horror BFF, the managing editor of DailyDead.com, Heather Wixson. Hi, Heather.
Hello. I know, it's I was going to say, it's our first Horror BFFs of the new year.
2020. And what's changing for Horror BFFs, Heather?
I don't know. What is changing?
It's nothing, exactly. I just wanted to put you on the spot, make you think like something was going to be different. Nothing's different.
I know. I was like, shit, what is he talking about? Don't do that to me.
Same old Horror BFFs, everyone. The same show you've come to know and love. Last year, we did a whole series on remakes that were celebrating their 10th anniversary. We talked about Friday the 13th. We talked about Sorority Row. We talked about The Stepfather. We talked about
I talked about The Stepfather. Let's be honest.
Did I not talk about The Stepfather?
You did everything to try to not have to talk about The Stepfather. I think that was your objective.
Me?
I know, but that was your objective, which I thought was pretty funny.
We talked about Last House on the Left. Am I forgetting any?
I don't have my cheat sheet in front of me, so I feel like a jerk.
I don't either. I'm winging all of this. So anyway, we thought what better way to start off 2020 than by continuing a series of remakes celebrating their 10-year anniversary. We had kind of teased it on the last episode anyway. We are kicking things off with The Crazies from 2010, directed by Breck Eisner, who sounds like every preppy who stole your lunch money as a kid.
Okay, so I have to say, let me just in fairness say this, because obviously Breck Eisner has some ties to the industry because of, who his dad is and stuff like that. But what's interesting about him is like he kind of worked his way up, because I think he worked as a PA for like years when he was going to like film school and stuff. So
sure.
Yeah, I know there's like a little bit of like, he's kind of sort of tumbled his way into the industry. But he also put in the work. So, but yeah.
I wasn't even making fun of his privilege, just saying that his name sounds like a private school kid who beats kids up.
Honestly, though, it's funny because we were just talking about Breckin Meyer, so it's like the shortened version of Brecken. So
I suppose so. Although his first name is actually Michael. He's like
Breckenmeyer or Breck Eisner?
Breck Eisner. His name is Michael Breckenridge Eisner, and Breck is short for Breckenridge.
Oh.
So that way he's not Michael Eisner II. He's Breck Eisner.
Okay. I mean, at least he's trying to like do his own thing, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yes, it does sound like the bully from like any 80s rom-com or something like that, of that nature.
Yeah.
Like, if you would have told me, like, one of the guys from Revenge of the Nerds' name was Breck Eisner, I would believe you.
Right. If you were going to tell me this was the guy that Craig Sheffer plays in Some Kind of Wonderful, I would believe you.
That is Hardy Jens.
Oh, I know.
Ends. Thank you very much.
I know damn well what his name is, but it could just as easily be Breck Eisner.
Very true. Very true.
This was the second Breck Eisner movie I had ever seen, because I saw Sahara with Matthew McConaughey and was kind of indifferent towards it, and then saw The Crazies and was actually pretty impressed by it. This is not a movie that even though it's a Romero film, it's not a movie that I have like, it's not precious to me. I like the Romero movie. I haven't seen it in a long time and wasn't able to watch it in preparation for this show. But, so it didn't bother me that they were remaking this, because this was around the time where they were remaking everything and had already remade Romero's Dawn of the Dead and had already remade Romero's Day of the Dead. And so I was fine with them remaking The Crazies, especially because I think they did a pretty good job with it.
I think this movie kicks all kinds of ass.
Yeah.
And rewatching it last night made me realize, like, wow, why don't we talk about The Crazies more? Because this movie is pretty awesome. I mean, obviously there's some sort of dated CGI stuff at the end.
Yeah.
But I think everything up until that point is like absolutely top notch. Yeah, it's interesting because I actually I saw Sahara in theaters, Sahara, and then I revisited it a couple of years ago because it was on cable, and was surprised by like how much fun it was. I was like, oh, I'm actually enjoying this way more than I remember liking it the first time. So yeah, I think he does some really badass things in this movie. As I mentioned to you before, like I haven't actually seen Romero's The Crazies the whole way through. I started watching it a couple years ago. I think it was like on Tubi or something like that. Because my home media collection isn't nearly as impressive as Mr. Bromley's. It isn't. I will always pale in comparison to that. So I just haven't had a chance to really sit down. And it was like I was having problems with it streaming, and I think I got like 30 minutes in, and it just kept freezing like during the commercials or something. And I was like, all right, forget it, I'm done. And I got mad at it. So it's not Mr. Romero's fault. It was the stupid streaming service's fault at the time, or my crappy internet. But this movie, I think when you do a remake, I mean, it does what every great remake should do. You know, obviously it adheres to the spirit of the original, but also brings something unique to the table. And I think this movie really does that. And I mean, it's got fantastic characters in it, really great performances, tension out the wazoo. And it's just a hell of a lot of fun. And I was like, when I rewatched it, I was like, why don't I watch this more? Why don't we talk about this movie more? Because it is so great.
This was the first time I had seen it since the theater. I remember going to see it in 2010, and I've owned the movie for many, many years. I think I bought it used when like a Blockbuster was going out of business or something. And I was like, oh, I remember liking this. I'll pay the $2 or whatever it costs to buy this movie. And it's sat on my shelf and I haven't rewatched it, but yeah, it was just as good as I remember it being. I will say there's a lot of scenes in the movie that are dark, and I don't mean dark like thematically. I mean hard to see. And I was watching it. Unfortunately, my living room is not well suited for dark movies during the daytime. So like my TV gets blown out, and there's probably half this movie that I just could not see. So I can't comment on those scenes.
I didn't have that issue at all.
All right.
Yeah. So you should have been in your fancy projector room.
I probably should have, yes.
Yeah. See, that's on you. That's not on the movie.
Didn't say the movie was bad because of it.
Oh, I think that's what you were saying. I think that's ultimately what you were getting to. But yeah, no, I think there's, it's so hard. I think, especially because like you want to. I think one of my big things is like movies that obviously have a lot of darkness to them, but yet there's like this weird unnatural light that happens, which you can just tell is like C-stands being up and like people using lights to kind of play that up. But I think there's a naturalness to sort of the way that a lot of these scenes unfold. But I do think actually some of the scariest shit that happens in this movie is in the daylight. I think that very first scene on the baseball field is incredible and unnerving and terrifying. And I like, as soon as that hit, I was like, oh my God, I forgot. Like that was when I was like immediately hooked. I
remember the trailer being built around that also. That baseball sequence.
Yeah, and that's in broad daylight, middle of the day. It's everything is picturesque and perfect. Small town America, enjoying a little baseball, and like then you've got this raving lunatic Rory coming in with like a shotgun, and there's all these children everywhere. Yeah. And I was like, God damn, this is good.
The opening credits, playing sort of the ironic, I think it's a Johnny Cash song. This is what the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead hath wrought, because they do the same thing. So that was a little bit, I thought, of a copycat move, but whatever. Because, yeah, as you said, the movie doesn't take very long to get going. That baseball scene happens pretty quickly. We get a little bit of character establishment, and then we're on the baseball field and things are up and running.
Yeah, it wastes very little time sort of setting the stage for everything. And I mean, and once that baseball scene hits, it's pretty, it basically just throws you right into it. Mm-hmm. But again, it never at the expense of the characters, because I think what really, sort of anchors is Timothy Olyphant and Radha Mitchell. And I think their relationship really, because you're so engrossed with what's happening around them. And I'm really glad that like they're so good in this movie, because I think if you didn't believe that they really cared for each other and were really, trying to pull through this, and obviously there's sort of, Judy's pregnancy is a thing as well that's sort of hanging over them in terms of their desperation to survive all of this. But I don't think if their performances weren't as strong as they were, I don't think it would have worked as well. And it's just nice to see Timothy Olyphant not playing a villain.
He's good, and I feel like it was shortly... was it around this time or shortly after when Justified started? Because I remember feeling like, wasn't he just playing his character from the Crazies?
I think it was like a few years later, like maybe like 2012. Was that when Justified started?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm terrible when it comes to TV stuff.
Started in 2010, so it was right around the same time.
Oh, it was. Wow. Yeah. I have no concept of time whatsoever.
That's okay.
All right.
That's what the internet is for.
It is. I'll blame it on the Trixie virus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I blame everything on Trixie. So, what a fun name too. I just like saying Trixie.
Well, and again, they're sort of reworking the language of a zombie movie by making it an outbreak movie, and we had seen that, with 28 Days Later, and Romero was doing something very similar with the original Crazies, but so many zombie movies had come and gone by the time this remake had come out that it was kind of cool to see a variation on the theme.
Well, and also too, what's interesting is that a lot of the horror that sort of unfolds in this, people aren't completely gone at that point.
Right.
Like there's still like some cognition to it, which I think is what makes it scary. Like when there's the scene when Rory basically sets his house on fire, and he's still there. Like he's not completely infected at that point. And I think for me, that's what makes it really scary, is that the terror comes not from what ultimately happens to these people, but like that in between period of where they're sort of transitioning, and there's such an unpredictability to it. And I think, Breck Eisner, he should be on Hoity Toity Horror. But he really leans into that so well here. And don't get me wrong, like, dealing with the infected folks, like, is horrifying. But I almost think the stuff like in between those moments is what ultimately is the scariest. Yeah,
the entire progression of, I think, Joe Anderson's character is one of the more interesting elements of the movie, as he sort of succumbs to this virus slowly instead of just showing up and being crazy all of a sudden. And that's something that you can't necessarily do in a zombie movie, because in a zombie movie, we always get the character who's bit, who knows that they're bit, and they know, so then they have to sacrifice themselves, basically. But they're not necessarily like slowly turning into a zombie necessarily. And in this movie, that's kind of what's happening with Joe Anderson, is he's acting very aggressive and kind of crazy, but not necessarily realizing why, because he's under the spell of this virus. And the moment where he recognizes that that's what's happening is one of my favorites in the movie.
Oh, when he says, like, can I just walk with you guys for a little bit longer?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, my heart breaks for him. Because I think, again, what I really love, because, everybody's like, sometimes people are like, oh, characters don't matter in horror movies. But I really think, like, The Crazies is a really good case study for why characters do matter. Because obviously we're there to see some crazy, we're going to throw the word crazy around a lot, I think, in this episode. We get a nickel every time we say that, crazy. So, but I think what's interesting is, like, we're there for the pandemonium and the chaos and the crazy kills and all that kind of stuff. But, like, the dynamic between Russell and David, and the fact that, they're so close as friends. And I think that's what makes Russell's demise so sad. And of course, obviously, he sacrifices himself in the end. But again, it's in a different way that we've seen that moment in horror movies or in movies in general so many times. And yet I like the way that Eisner sort of frames it here. I guess maybe that's more the screenplay from Scott Kozar and Ray Wright. I think the way that he frames it ultimately just makes it feel really tragic. And I think there's a really good weight to that.
Yeah, it's something we were saying when we were talking about, I think it's when we were talking about Crawl recently on when we were naming our best horror of the year, that if you can just sketch characters enough to make us care, to make us know who they are, to give some sort of dramatic stakes, it makes all the difference in horror movies. And this, you know, the movie doesn't spend a ton of time like talking about what its characters want and who they are deep inside. And we don't get a lot of like tangential scenes where they discuss their hopes and dreams or anything like that. But there's enough there to make us give a shit that, you know, when Russell turns, we feel it. You know, we feel it for the characters and we feel it for ourselves as audience members.
Yeah, and I think also too, there's the scene that happens in the nursery with Rory's wife and son. Yeah, and I love that the son is played by Justin Wellborn, who is sort of
shows up in a lot of horror movies.
Heck yeah. I almost said the F word, but I'll say that for later. But yeah, which is, I think that was such a really, again, one of those moments where it's in this space that's supposed to represent hope. And, you know, it's representing David and Judy's dreams of, you know, the life that they always wanted. They wanted to live on this little, you know, in this house and this little community and raise their child. And, you know, and there's in the realization that that's not going to happen now. And then to bring the horror into there, again, in a really fantastic set piece. It works so well. Like it was one of those, like, I knew I liked this movie. And as I was watching last night, I was like, Jesus, like this is an incredibly well-crafted horror movie that really manages to, like, you know, pay tribute to everything that we love about like Romero's stuff, you know, because there's obviously, you know, things that tie into the Crazies, but obviously Night of the Living Dead as well. But ultimately stands on its own as a really great piece of filmmaking. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite sequence in the movie?
Oh, you know, I feel like the pitchfork scene is pretty gnarly.
That's it.
Like, Jesus Christ.
My memory was the car wash. Like, that was a scene that I really remember, but that's because I was a huge Danielle Panabaker fan from Sky High. I was always like, oh my gosh, who is that actor? And she's shown up in a couple of horror movies, and I know she's on The Flash, but I don't watch The Flash. But I was a big fan of hers, so when she showed up in this, she had all of my affection as a character, and so I was bummed out when she goes out in the car wash scene. But watching it today, it's definitely the pitchfork scene.
Yeah, the car wash, I love that sequence because, like, just because there's so much confusion and frustration that comes out during that sequence. Like, I love the fact that, like, first of all, I applaud them because, like, going in a car wash, I could never get my tire to line up with the goddamn track that you're supposed to put your tire in that moves your car through the car wash.
Yes, I've had that problem too.
Yeah, so the fact that they did that so carelessly, I was like, wow. And then the fact that they're sort of stuck in there because once the thing starts moving and then all these things are going off around them and you've got foam spraying at them and water and, you know, like these, you know, the brushes and everything like rotating around them. And I'm going to drop my one F-bomb, but I love the fact that, like, you know, at one point Russell's like shooting at the car and, you know, basically David's like, you know, don't do that or whatever. And Russell's like, well, you know, I saw something moving. And he's like, everything is fucking moving. And I was like, yes, you know, and it's such a great, like, again, I'm like, why have we, like, I know we had a car wash death in one of the Final Destination movies. But I think this one is probably the best of the bunch because it's just like, there's so much that's coming at them and they, you know, they can only see bits and pieces of it. And the way that, like, Becca basically gets swooped up and ends up getting, like, hung, like, holy crap, that is brutal. Yeah. That is absolutely brutal. And again, I'm just like, Jesus, like, this movie we need to put some respect on the Crazies. Because again, it could have really fallen victim to sort of treading familiar territory, especially in the early, you know, coming into a new decade, like, where horror wasn't exactly, you know, we weren't doing a ton of new stuff then. And I think it really just, it taps into so much paranoia. I think especially what I loved about it was sort of coming off of, like, sort of the collapse of Americana in 2008, 2009. And the fact that it's this small town that collapsed. And I think, ultimately there was a lot of small communities that collapsed after the housing crisis, at sort of the end of the 2000s or the aughts or whatever. And I think it was a really clever way to sort of tap into that, in a very new and different way. And it just, again, it's one of those where I'm like, geez, I'm so mad at myself that I haven't been rewatching this movie more regularly, because there's a lot of really good, smart, insightful things in there.
Well, and you saying that, I'm thinking the Crazies could probably just as easily be remade today, and we would all be hailing it as this statement about, the way that the country is sort of turning in on itself and neighbor fighting with neighbor and, just kind of the political landscape, which just goes to show how crazy ahead of his time George Romero always was. No matter what he was doing, he just really understood certain things about human nature and sociology that continue to play year after year.
No, absolutely. And I think also, too, what's interesting to me as well, just because of, again, things that are going on these days, and of course, I know it was probably hearkening back to some of the things that were going on during World War II. The scenes when the government, when the military guys show up, and there's that mass panic that sets in, as they're rounding up these people, throwing them on train cars at some point, and just basically giving them wristbands. I mean, it's obviously, evocative of, the atrocities of World War II. But ultimately, what's really freaking sad is that it's not too far from where we are today. And I'm like, what? Okay. I never would have thought in 2010 that kind of stuff would harken to something that's going to happen again. Right. Right. What? That's ridiculous. And I think, again, that's sort of the power of what this movie is wow, we should have been listening, and we just weren't. And it's pretty sad in that respect.
When will horror characters learn that when the military or guys in suits show up, it's rarely a good thing?
Oh, I don't think this movie ever makes the case that it's a good thing.
No, I know, but I'm saying in most horror movies, it's not a good thing.
It's never a good thing.
28 weeks later, the military is good. Right? Weeks, not days. In days, they're bad. In weeks, I feel like they're good.
Yes.
I haven't seen Weeks since it came out, but my memory is that the military are the good guys in that movie.
I think I would agree.
Okay. If you're listening and I'm wrong, I apologize. Like I said, I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah, we're okay with being wrong every now and again. Not very often.
I'm okay with being wrong all the time. I've had to make my peace with it.
But yeah, I mean, when the military sort of comes in, and it's I think for me, obviously the stuff that happens when they're corralling everybody is horrible. But I think the scene when they come across Scotty, who is sort of the love interest to Daniel Panabaker's Becca. And he goes because he's going to go get his mom. And then the government's the military's already there. And then basically he's running towards them and they shoot him for no reason. Right. And then she runs to him and they shoot her. And then they freaking use a flamethrower on them. And I was like, wow. I mean, and that's, again, it's one of those things where this movie does not mess around. There is some really powerful imagery. And it's to me, that is so horrifying. And we find out when they take the one guy hostage, these are just guys blindly following orders because they have no idea. They've been told something completely different than what's actually happening. And I think, again, you look at I don't even know that we necessarily had a huge governmental distrust in 2010. But again, there's some parallels to that movie to where we are today, where you're like, oh, okay, we've learned nothing as a society.
Yeah, I think there's still some residual mistrust from the George W. Bush years.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think about that and I'm I don't want to get too political or anything that, but I'm I just don't think we understood how good we had it for the 8 years that we had it pretty okay. Like, obviously, we were rebuilding and things. We were coming out of some pretty terrible stuff, but I don't think how we realized just how okay we had it, you know, in terms of where we are now and where we were before then. So,
better Timothy Olyphant horror movie, this or Scream 2?
Oh, don't do that.
I just did it.
No. How do you make me choose? I mean, I really like him in Scream 2, but I think as a vehicle for him in particular, I think this is a better movie. Because Mickey, you know, Mickey's just kind of a side character for most of Scream 2 until obviously the third act.
Well, which movie are you watching if they're sitting side by side on the shelf?
Oh, I mean, I always watch the Scream movies, you know that. Like, but that's not because it's like a Timothy Olyphant vehicle.
No,
it's
I know.
mostly because of Laurie Metcalf. No, I'm just kidding.
People rarely call Scream 2 a Timothy Olyphant vehicle.
Yeah. You want to know something funny? Because what I learned with the Crazies is that Timothy Olyphant has a very tiny waist.
Yes, I knew that actually from watching Justified and from his arc on The Office. He is a slender man.
He has a size 28 waist. They had to specially make pants for him for the Crazies.
That's bananas, isn't
it? It's kind of there's sort of a special nostalgia I have when it comes to this movie too, because when this movie was getting ready to come out and they were starting to promote it, I actually worked for the special effects shop that was behind the Crazies. So it was really interesting to me because, like, when I watched it last night, I actually watched the BTS when they make up Brett Wagner at the shop. And it made me sad because I just kind of missed that. And I was like, oh, wow, look at all that. Like, these are the people I used to work with and, you know, people that used to be friends and stuff like that. But it was really cool when they were getting ready to do this. They had a special premiere here in Los Angeles, and I got to be part of the planning team, which was pretty rad. And they did a screening at the Vista Theater, and then they did this party at like a studio that's like right near there. But what's really cool is what they did is they had everybody drive to the studio first and then walk to the theater. And they set it up so, like, as people were driving into the lot, there was like all these people dressed up like in military garb, and they were like yelling at them. And actually, Brian got to do like a really fun promotional video for it that we put online in 2010 and stuff like that, where like people are driving in and they're getting screamed at and they're like, go, go, go. And people were freaking out. And it was just really awesome. Like, it was such a really fun sort of way to immerse people before the movie even started. Like, this is my favorite thing was like, we were sitting like in like this eagle view, like eagle's nest view of everybody. Cause Brian was shooting everything, and Brad Miska like starts driving in, and like these people are screaming at him, and he's like, what the hell is going on? And it was just really cool to like, I miss promotion like that. You know, it's all pretty standard these days, where it's like, you know, you go watch the movie, you go work the junket, and that's that. You know, and the red carpet itself is kind of like, you know, depending on what the level of the movie is, you know, if you're Disney or you're Marvel, you're making it super immersive. Otherwise, it's pretty standard. And I just missed that when movies did stuff like this, where they really kind of like thought outside the box, and to be involved with it was really cool. Because it was like, it felt really special to me. And I think part of it maybe was the reason I hadn't watched the Crazies in a while was because I was sort of forlorn about like that time, because it really, like, to me, like being able to be a part of that was like something that meant a lot to me. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I was watching, I was like, oh my God, like, you know, there's a really, really quick shot in the movie when they're towards the end at the truck stop, when they're in the truck, in sort of in the distance, there's like this big, huge bloated body that they made that was actually supposed to be more prominently featured in the film, and it ended up not being. And that thing sat in my boss's conference room, who is Rob Hall, obviously I can just say, because everybody can just Google it or whatever. And the big boys, we called him, like sat in a conference room. It was like sort of the centerpiece, and it was just weird. Like I like seeing it like just briefly in the movie. I was like, oh, there's Big Boy. I was like, oh, okay. So like for me, maybe it was just because I was sort of, I have like an emotional attachment to everything around this movie is maybe why I hadn't really revisited it. But boy, after rewatching, I was like, I am definitely going to put this into the rotation more, because I really feels like it deserves it. And again, and this is, the effects in this movie are fantastic. Like there's some really cool stuff that they did. If you watch special features, it's not weird to like make, people who are infected like veiny and stuff like that, but they're actually not. It's not the typical way that makeup artists do it. Like they use like sticker appliances for it, because it was such an elaborate makeup to have to do on so many different people. So they really had to be able to like work fast and, get the stuff done. But yeah, it was like all of a sudden being immersed in like sort of like my first year out here in LA. So it was really interesting to me in that regard. It was like funny because Brian came out after I finished it and he was like, "You look sad." And I was like, "I think I am a little sad." Yeah. But in a good way. I mean, it was something really special and being able to be a part of it. And I got to hang out with Timothy Olyphant that night.
And his size 28 waist.
I did. And he was very tiny. But it was cool because I actually did get to talk to him about Scream 2 that night. So,
nice.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you think that, the original Romero film isn't talked about as much as a lot of his other films. Do you think that maybe that's why this movie isn't really remembered as much, because it's not as recognized, it's a remake, but it's not as recognizable a brand as some of the remakes that came out around the same time? Right.
Like something like Dawn of the Dead, where like, everybody, whether you like horror or not, you've heard of Dawn of the Dead.
Right.
So that's like has sort of that's sort of out there beyond, the horror circles, I think to a degree.
Even for horror fans, I feel like the Crazies is a slightly deeper cut.
Oh, it totally is. Cause I never saw it in a VHS, like in the video store when I was a kid. Like, I don't remember ever seeing it. Like, I think we had Fox Video and then obviously then Blockbuster. I don't really remember the Crazies being on a shelf anywhere. Cause I feel like I would have rented it. And that's why I didn't get a chance to see it until like a few years ago. And then stupid Tubi TV was being goofy, or again, maybe it was my internet. I don't want to blame it all on Tubi because they're a good resource for a lot of folks because
this movie is currently streaming on Tubi.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've recently watched stuff on Tubi and had no problem. So again, it could have just been my crappy internet back then. So I don't want to put the onus on them or anything like that. But yeah, maybe it's because, it'd be like if they remade Martin. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's also another sort of Romero deep cut where like there's a good, 50% of the horror community that's going to be like, oh my God, yes. And then there's going to be like sort of the casual horror fans are going to be like, oh, I think I've heard of that, but they probably have never seen the original for obvious reasons. Or even something like Night Riders.
Yeah.
Which, I think that recently got a Blu-ray a few years ago.
Yeah.
So it's like, when it's interesting to me because maybe, if this had been called, Night of the Living Dead, whatever, like obviously we would be, it probably would be out there a little bit more, but I kind of am okay with that. Like, I like the fact that this is sort of, it's not, as we'll get into other remakes that came out in 2010, it's not like Nightmare on Elm Street. It doesn't have the pressure of having to live up to a huge legacy. And I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the movie did pretty well when it came out. Like, I remember it doing fairly decent. And I want to say it was even like a People's Choice or like a Critics' Choice. No, not Critics' Choice because critics don't care about horror. But I think it was like it wasn't, like maybe an MTV award or something like that. But I remember it still being a thing. Or maybe it was a Scream Awards. Oh God, I miss the Scream Awards. But yeah, I think it's one of those that I think it sort of just exists. And because it's not so directly connected to something that's super popular, that's probably why it's just sort of faded a little bit. But yeah, I mean, and again, if you're somebody who's like, oh, remakes, boo, like I understand, I completely understand. But you really should give this one a chance because I think there's a lot of really great stuff in it.
The movie opened in third place behind Cop Out and Shutter Island, on its way to making $55 million on a $20 million budget.
You know what's really crazy is I remember going to see Cop Out that weekend.
Me too.
And I do not remember a single thing about Cop Out.
I do, because I've seen it a handful of times. I don't know why, but
why?
I don't know.
You could have been watching the Crazies all those times.
I know. One of my jobs used to be writing about comedians and comedy. And so I remember reviewing Cop Out for that, like theatrically. That's why I saw it. And then I reviewed the Blu-ray, so I saw it a second time. And then I think I just like caught it on cable at 2 a.m. one time and watched it all the way through. So I've probably seen Cop Out 3 times.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I was excited for Cop Out too. And then I heard all the terrible stories that came out of it. And then I was like, oh. Yeah. And then I realized, I was like, oh, sometimes your heroes aren't what you thought they were.
Yeah.
Wah, wah.
Better Radha Mitchell horror movie, this or Silent Hill?
Silent Hill. Oh. Why are you doing this to me? This is terrible.
I'm a monster.
I know. I don't even know that I can compare the two because they're so different.
Which one are you reaching for on the shelf?
Wow. I think it's just because this one kind of felt like was sort of tucked away. I mean, I definitely watched Silent Hill more than I watched the Crazies. Oh boy. Yeah. I mean, if I want like sort of like, I don't want to say ethereal, but sort of like otherworldly horror, like obviously I'm going to go Silent Hill. But I'll tell you after watching this again, like, I don't know. I might tend to pick up the Crazies now more. Yeah, don't make me choose like this. This is terrible.
Better Radha Mitchell horror movie, this or Pitch Black?
Oh, Jesus. Now this is just like, now you've stuck the knife in and now you're just like twisting it like, or the pitchfork and you're just like stabbing it over and over again.
That pitchfork scene is so good, by the way.
Oh my God. It's so terrifying.
Yeah.
Because you're strapped in a gurney. You can't go anywhere.
Right.
It's like, holy shit. Man, but I love Pitch Black. I don't know. I probably would go with this over Pitch Black, maybe. I don't know.
Interesting.
Like, I don't know. It's weird because again, like, I don't think of that as a Radha Mitchell movie. I think, obviously it's a Vin Diesel movie. Yeah, God. By the way, can I just tell you, this is really funny. So my mom has become super obsessed with the Fast and the Furious movies all of a sudden.
Makes sense.
I mean, I don't know where that came from. And she's actually said to me repeatedly now that she prefers Vin Diesel to The Rock. And I feel like that's further confirmation that I was definitely adopted. Like, I don't even know what to say to her when she says that because every instinct in my body is just to like, do what people do online and be like, no, and start like saying stuff. And I was like, no, it's her opinion. She's entitled to it, even though it's wrong. But yeah, I was just like, we just had a conversation like 2 days ago. And she's like, I spent, she actually rented Hobbs and Shaw, which I'm really impressed that she actually figured out how to rent something off of her cable system because she's very not technologically savvy. But she was like, I really liked Hobbs and Shaw. She's like, but I think I prefer Dominic better. She's like, we needed Dominic in there, really. And I was like, did it need Dominic, Mom? So, yeah. So
I like Vin Diesel, like in Riddick mode. We'll come back to him in just a minute, but like I think he's genuinely like a dork who loves Dungeons and Dragons and science fiction. And like, so I dig that about him. I do not care for him in Dominic Toretto mode.
Yeah, I'm okay with like XXX mode to a degree.
Sure.
I'm okay with him, obviously Pitch Black. I think, especially Riddick was so good. Yeah. But I think that was because it didn't rely on him in a vocal capacity as much. Because he has a great presence. And right. I think the fact that like the first 10 minutes of that movie is just him walking around with the dog, like that was, it's beautiful. And I think that really tapped into who he is as a physical presence. But yeah, I don't I'm sorry. Like, I know there's like the big debate between The Rock versus Vin Diesel because of everything that's happened with those movies. And I'm always going to side with The Rock. Like, and I love Vin Diesel. Like, I got to interview him for Riddick, and he was so super nice. And it was right as James Wan was about to take on the Fast and Furious series. And we were joking at the end because I was like, oh, you're about to get one of ours, into your world. So you should treat him right. And he's like, oh, I love James's work. And he started geeking out about something from like Insidious. And I was like,
nice.
Whoa, like he knows, he knows these things, and
right.
he's very geeky, and he was really sweet. But if I have to choose, I'm going to choose The Rock.
I got to rewatch Riddick. It's been a few years since I watched it, and I like that movie. I still haven't seen Hobbs and Shaw.
It's goofy. It's fun. It's super predictable, but I didn't care. Like, it was a fun sort of, hey, let's go and just watch some crazy action happening. And, The Rock and Jason Statham do some verbal sparring and, basically jerk themselves off or whatever. Not literally, but figuratively. Although I probably watched the literal version of that as well. I don't know what that says about me. But yeah, it's goofy. I was, I just wanted to go and be entertained for 2 hours, and I was, but it was super predictable. But it was cool to see Idris Elba be like a villain.
Yeah.
So I can't be mad at it. I mean, I don't think it's anywhere near as good as one of like the stronger Fast and Furious entries, but for a little escapism, it's fun.
Better Radha Mitchell horror movie, this or Rogue?
Oh God, this. I mean, I like Rogue, but it's not as like it's not as enthralling. I don't know how to explain it, but I would definitely choose this.
Yeah, I probably would too.
Yeah.
But I would choose Pitch Black over this.
Okay. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen Pitch Black. They
rules.
show it a lot. I know it totally rules. I actually saw it in theaters because I didn't know
Me
what
too.
it was, and I was like, all right, let's go. And there was like maybe the theater wasn't even like a third of the way full, but I was completely like, yes, give me this all again, And I had it on DVD, but I don't have it on Blu-ray. So
I even like the Chronicles of Riddick. That's how ride or die I am for that universe.
Yeah, it's everybody sort of made it into this big atrocity of a movie, and I actually think it's kind of fun in the way that it goes big.
Yes, it does.
It really does. Like, for as intimate and sort of scrappy as Pitch Black is, it's sort of the antithesis of it. And I think I actually rewatched it before Riddick, and I was like, this isn't as bad as everybody. Like, I didn't see it in theaters because I think it came at like a weird time, but like I rented it and then I rewatched it again, again before Riddick in like 2013. I was like, oh, this isn't nearly the worst movie ever made as everybody said it was. Because everything is, if you don't like something, it's the worst movie ever made.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So, yeah, but I think there's like, when you look at like the Crazies, like there's like pretty much from the top down, there's a lot of really, really good performances in this. And, and obviously, Timothy and Radha, Joe Anderson and Danielle Panabaker. I really like Brett Rickaby in this movie because he's, again, Pitchfork stuff. That's pretty crazy. I remember I geeked out the first time I saw this when I realized Aaron from 24 was in it. Just a very minor moment, towards the end, because he plays the guy whose truck they flip and they're trying to question him and stuff. Right. But I was like, oh my God, it's Aaron from 24. Like, that's how geeky I am.
I don't remember his name being Aaron, but I definitely remember him being the guy from 24.
I think it was Aaron Pierce, wasn't it?
Sure.
Yeah. Cause he was like the Secret Service guy and he was always very devoted to, what's his face? And I can't believe he did the State Farm commercials. And
Dennis Haysbert.
Yes. He was like the best president ever. But yeah, no, it's just like, and there's just a lot of really fun stuff in here. And then I love that they sort of lean into this idea, like the Jaws legacy of terrible mayors. Because there's a scene where like David and Russell go to talk to the mayor and they're like, Mayor, like this is in the water. And the mayor's like, whatever. He's like, I'm not shutting down the water. Like, you could have prevented all of this. And the mayor's like, screw it. I got a big pool. I got water things to enjoy. So I don't know if he's necessarily as bad as the mayor of Jaws, but he's pretty bad. Like, yeah. I feel like we need to look at like really terrible mayors in horror movies and kind of build a spectrum of like from one to mayor from Jaws bad.
Well, again, the system so quickly breaks down in these horror movies because there's no leadership. There's no one at the top trying to hold things together. And so we once again get that trope in this movie, you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like it's chaos within like 24 hours of everything sort of happening, which is, again, what I sort of like about it is just that, it doesn't waste time. But yet it never at the expense of the story or the characters.
Right. And
that's not always an easy thing to pull off. And I like the fact that, this movie could have been set anywhere. And it's like this really small community in Iowa, which like how many horror movies do we get out of Iowa?
It's pretty rare.
Yeah. So, I like the fact that it's just sort of in the middle of nowhere. And again, I think that's sort of pretty conscientious of just sort of breaking down middle America, especially like the small farming community, that's supposed to be idyllic. It's the place you want to raise your kids. It's the place you want to, spend your entire life in, and you never really want to leave. And yet ultimately at the end, you have your two main characters being forced to leave.
So to bring it back to Vin Diesel, Breck Eisner really only made one more feature after this.
Was that The Last Witch Hunter?
The Last Witch Hunter, which he makes a movie apparently every 5 years, because he made Sahara in 2005. He makes this in 2010. Last Witch Hunter is 2015. So he's due for something this year.
All right. I know he's doing TV these days.
Okay.
Yeah, I know he's been doing TV, which is good. That's fine. There's a lot of good stuff going on TV these days.
Sure.
But I would totally be down for some more Breck Eisner. I'm actually surprised by the fact that this movie was successful that we didn't have a sequel.
Yeah, although what is the sequel going to be? Just kind of a wasteland of nothingness and.
Well, if they're going towards Cedar Rapids, I mean. Is it actually contained? Does it keep going?
More importantly, did you know The Last Witch Hunter made $147 million?
What? That's like escape room money.
How did we not get a sequel to that? I never saw it. Now I need to see it.
I never saw it either.
I was totally down for it because, again, it was like Vin Diesel in nerd mode. But for whatever reason, I missed it.
Yeah, because isn't like he is. Okay, I was right. I just looked it up. I was like, isn't Elijah Wood in that movie? And he is. Look at that. And Michael Caine. How did I not see this movie?
Yeah. All-star cast. $150 million at the box office.
What?
Director Breck Eisner.
Look at him.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
And for a long time, he was like the go-to guy for to direct sequels. So he was attached to a sequel to Creature from the Black Lagoon for a while. Okay. He's been attached to remakes of Flash Gordon, The Brood, and Escape from New York, none of which ended up happening.
Oh, I mean, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, me too.
That's okay.
Didn't that Escape from New York come really close? It was going to be Gerard Butler.
I think so, but boy, that would be not a good idea.
And we kind of got an Escape from New York remake with Lockout starring Guy Pearce. So much so that I think John Carpenter sued that movie and won.
Oh, I never actually saw Lockout, but I do remember. I do remember the brouhaha. Did you say it's pretty good or not pretty good?
No, it's pretty good.
Oh, okay. I did not get a chance to make time for it.
Yeah,
so
it's entertaining.
Interesting. By the way, I feel like we, as horror nerds, we didn't mention the fact that we do see Lynn Lowry in this movie as well.
That's right.
Which is really fun because she's riding around on a bicycle. Which again, I feel like we also need to talk about creepy characters on bicycles in horror movies. Because that's I love that. That's one of my favorite parts of In the Mouth of Madness. is creepy kids on bicycles or creepy characters. But yeah, I just thought it was really fun that she sort of rides through at a certain point. And I was like, I actually was like, when I was watching it last night, because I didn't even dawn on me, and I was like, I paused it for a second. I was like, wait, I think that was Lynn Lowry. And then I looked it up and I was like, well, son of a bitch, it was.
It is, in fact.
So look at that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those movies that really, it definitely does its own thing, tips its hat, in a very clever way to the original source material. But I love the fact that it does sort of lean on some of the scarier elements of something like Night of the Living Dead as well. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much George was involved with this. Like, I don't know if it was just executive producer George Romero because it was his movie, or if like he and Breck had conversations about things. But you can tell that, sometimes you have directors who kind of come in to do these types of films and they have sort of no affection for their creators or for the material. And
right.
You can feel that there is a real affection for George's sort of the template that George laid out with his career, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, he definitely is trying to keep the spirit of the original film alive while updating it, which is, what good remakes should do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, I just, when I was watching, and then it's one of the rare sort of iffy CG shots, but like the knife in the hand, I was still last night. I was like, oh my God. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get stabbed in my hand. I'd probably be okay getting stabbed anywhere, but my hand just seems like the worst place.
Yeah, that would suck.
I mean, obviously other than the heart or your brain, but like,
I put a knife through my thumb once.
Oh, I sliced off my fingertip once.
Oh, this is no good.
Yeah, I was when I was working at White Hen, and
I did that too on the
meat slicer, right?
Yeah, I did it twice in a day. I cut myself on that.
Oh my God. Yeah, because you're supposed to be 18 to like use the meat slicer, but like whatever. And I remember because I used to make sandwiches, like when I'd be working there, and like the two guys I was working with, like I would be like, oh, slice me up some salami or whatever. And they were, being 20-year-old dickheads in the cooler, just, making me do all the work. And I was like, well, fine, I'm going to make my own sandwich. And I forgot to put the guard down that you're supposed to put, like, that sits on top of the meat. Yikes. Where that's, and I didn't. And I just had my hand on top of the salami and I was slicing. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh God, I think that was my finger. And it was weird because it was like a pause where it didn't bleed. And then it bled for 3 hours. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So my right hand, if you look at my pointer finger, it has like a slight little curve because I sliced off my fingertips. So something to look out for if I ever meet any of you listening in real life. I like that we're slicer buddies, though. I didn't realize that you did that too.
I did it twice in a day. I did it once, just kind of nicked my finger and it bled a lot, but I was like, I'm okay. And then I did it a second time and like kind of took the tip of my fingertip off, and then I went home.
Yeah, and then you're like, I'm not okay.
No, right. Yeah, second one, I was like, I probably shouldn't have gone back to the slicer after doing it once. But yeah, I was...
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
I was cutting a pumpkin and put a knife through my thumb, and it hurt a lot.
Like through your thumb?
Pretty much, yeah, because when I went to the emergency room, then they had to clean it out, and they basically like stuck a tube in it and pushed hydrogen peroxide through the wound, and it was...
Could you do the thing where you could stick your thumb up in front of your face and see through it?
I wish.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's not like Natural Born Killers, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. I mean, but that's still pretty gnarly.
Yeah, it sucked. It was not cool. I haven't cut a pumpkin since.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I don't carve pumpkins anymore anyway because they're super messy and I'm weird like that. I'm no fun. But yeah, oh my God, that is pretty terrible. Like, it's bad enough like when you get a knife jammed up underneath like your fingernail. Like, oh.
Does that happen often? You make that sound like that's a regular thing.
Well, if you're like cutting something or like, I'll be trying to like open something and I'll use a knife and then I'm like, oh, I just jabbed the tip of the knife underneath my fingernail and
Yikes.
It is terrible. It's happened a few times,
Yikes.
Yeah, it's not fun. It's no knife through the thumb though.
No. What remake are we doing next?
Oh wow. So 2010 is an interesting variety of films because I actually went and looked them up. So our next options, we can do I Spit on Your Grave.
Yikes.
Yeah, we could do Let Me In.
Much better.
We have Piranha.
That's a fun one.
We have The Wolf Man.
Less fun.
I mean, I haven't seen it since I saw it at the drive-in. I saw that at the drive-in on my birthday, and I fell asleep, which is just the worst.
I don't know that I've seen it since then either.
Yeah, so that'll be an interesting one. If we want to do a little fantasy horror, there's also Clash of the Titans. And then, of course, the big one of 2010 would be the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. And I feel like we should just save that for the last, I guess.
Oh, okay. Yikes.
So, I don't know. So we could do Piranha next if you want.
Sure.
I mean, I feel like we're front loading all the fun ones. So maybe we have to take a bullet for the next one and then go back to a fun one. I mean,
which ones count as the bullets? Nightmare on Elm Street and The Wolfman?
And probably I Spit on Your Grave.
Oh, Jesus, I forgot about I Spit on Your Grave.
You already forgot about it. It's been a minute. It's been literally a minute since
That's
I
how
mentioned
much
it.
I'm trying to push it out of my head.
Oh, yeah. And we could do The Wolfman next.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we'll both be pleasantly surprised.
Maybe.
Maybe. You never know.
It
but
looked
yeah, seriously.
great. Like it was, well shot. Good production design. Didn't care for the effects, but.
Yeah, I just made the mistake because like we went because it was my birthday, and so we spent the day at golf and stuff. Doing Karate Kid things as you do when you live in LA. Because I just had never been to golf and stuff, so we went to golf and stuff to spend the day, and then went to the drive-in at night because I like to go to the drive-in on my birthday. Because I'm super fancy in that respect, and because at that point Brian had like a convertible car and stuff, so it was like the fresh air is around us, and we literally, I think just because we'd been out all day, like we both fell asleep at the drive-in. And of course it's like, and we're completely open to the elements and everything. Like somebody could have come along and like robbed us or like done terrible things to us because like we're just sleeping in like this wide open car at the drive-in. So we're super fun.
Not to change the plan, I don't know. I Spit on Your Grave is currently streaming for free on Tubi and Vudu.
Okay.
So should we do that before they take it down?
Yeah, let's do that then.
Okay.
Yes. I love how we're doing our like administrative planning right now while we're doing the episode. So
people like to hear this.
Yes, we're pulling back the curtain, everybody. This is the real magic of Horror BFFs.
Well, it was fun to talk about the Crazies with you. Thank you. It was good to revisit
Absolutely.
this movie.
Yeah, and if you like, for real, guys, if you've never seen the movie, please go watch it. If you have seen it and it's been a while, go watch it. This is my mission now for this year. It's like, I know somebody's going to write about it for the 10th anniversary because that's what we do. But for real, this movie is so deserving of a much bigger appreciation than I think it gets. And that's my mission for 2020 is that we're going to get Crazies to the level that it should be at.
All right.
Yes. That's my platform for the year.
It's a good platform. You should be the one to write the anniversary piece then.
I guess. I mean, I've pretty much already made Scream 4 a thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, I feel like my work there is done. Scream 3 is never going to happen, and I've come to terms with that. But I think I'm like, okay, I think the Crazies could be my new pet project. So let's make it happen. All 2020, right. All about the Crazies.
Thank you guys for listening to another episode of Horror BFFs. Thank you to our engineer, Brian. Thank you to all of our Corpse Club subscribers. To find out more about becoming a subscriber to Corpse Club, visit corpseclub.com and make sure you check out dailydead.com every day for all the latest and greatest in what's going on in horror. On behalf of my Horror BFF, Heather, thank you again for listening. And until next time, stay scary.